Welcome to Impact Effect Podcast. We've got an amazing episode that's about to drop with Andrew Lell. Let's
Hey.
go. I'm fired up today for a couple reasons. One, Andrew's just a great guy. He's been through all types of situations and scenarios around business, and he's got such a positive, forward-thinking mind. And hopefully we'll dive into that today. But as you know, first things first, as we ask all our guests, Andrew, how do you define impact, and how do you show up in the world and provide impact today?
Yeah, Jim, that's such an amazing question.
Coming in hot,
Yeah,
right?
coming in hot. For me, I think impact, as I look through the lens of what I've learned, I think for me, impact is more than just what I can consume from the world. I truly believe it goes even beyond legacy. A lot of people want to leave legacies so they can be remembered. I think the more important thing is to be a catalyst that encourages others to walk into their full potential. That's what I want to be known for.
Yeah.
Is I don't want to be known for, oh, Andrew did this and Andrew was a billionaire and Andrew had all this. Is I want there to be a sea of people that when I'm gone, that when they hear my name, they don't necessarily think about me, but they're like, man, I remember when Andrew told me I could do that. I remember when I was down and Andrew said, hey, be encouraged. You've got this. I remember when Andrew encouraged me to rise up, and that's what I want them to remember. And from then on out, it's them that did the work,
Yeah.
right? It's them that did the work. And my one request, moving past what I think impact is, to me, walking that out is, I hope that all of those people take that same seed and plant it in as many other people as is humanly possible in their lifetime. Because if we can start a ripple effect over the next 100 years, 200 years, to change the way people interact, communicate, relate with one another, are generous and love one another, to me, there's nothing better. And if I can be just a spark, because there's only so many people I can talk to, there's only so many people I can reach. But if I can encourage those that I do to do the same thing, it becomes exponential. And for me, I think that's what having a long-term impact means. And absolutely, you can have impact today. We're having impact, having a fantastic conversation here this morning. But for me, long-term, that's what impact means to me, is that I'm not looking for accolades for me. I'm not looking for my name in lights somewhere. I'm looking for people to say, wow, Andrew really encouraged me. I'm so thankful God put that guy in my path.
Wow. Wow. I'm thankful that God put you in my path, brother.
Thanks, brother. Hey, same here, brother.
Just thinking through, where'd you learn that, man? That's pretty profound to take oneself out of that equation,
Yeah.
essentially, right? I mean, that's really where your root of
Yeah.
impact is yes, it's me doing it, but I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about you and affecting others. Where did that come from?
I have to say, honestly, I'd like to say that it's a culmination, obviously, of a lot of experiences and myself kind of steeped and crock-potted over time. But if I go back to the initial source, it would be my parents.
Yeah.
My dad and mom were both in ministry my entire life. And so they lived a selfless life. Their entire lives were given to others. They sacrificed, they poured into others, they loved on others, and they didn't make a lot of money doing it. So it wasn't about the money.
Yeah.
It was about what you received and what you could give back to others that had eternal value, long-term value. And so it's my mom and dad that really seeded probably the best qualities that exist in me today at a young point in my life when I was just a child.
Of course, of course. The parental impact.
Yeah.
It's deep. You talked about money.
Yeah.
Your parents were doing that. They didn't have a lot of money. How do you view money with your impact today? Are you more of like, it's not about the money, or is that an important piece
Sure.
in how you view impact?
Well, and here's my thing is, obviously over time, my view on money has shifted. When I was 10 years old.
Hopefully all of ours a little bit, right?
Exactly. It started when I was 10 years old. I got a picture of the old CD, the Sony CD Walkman, because You wanted to go from the tape. You were too OG if you had the tape cassette, right?
Yep. Was this the yellow one?
So
Remember
this
the
was the
yellow
silver
one?
and blue one. This was
Okay,
the
I know the
silver and blue. Yeah,
silver and
yeah.
blue.
This was the silver and blue one. And so for Christmas, I got a picture with a $20 bill and kind of an IOU note saying, "Hey, we want to get this for you. We're going to get it for you. We just can't right now."
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly at that moment thinking to myself, "I will never be poor the rest of my life. And I will do whatever it takes to not have to have my family to stick an IOU note on something." And thinking back, obviously, it's kind of a selfish thing, but it became a driver
Yeah.
for me. And for a long time, money was more important than a lot of other things, and that was the toxic side
Yep.
of that. As I pursued it at the cost of relationships,
Yep.
I pursued it at even almost detrimenting my own marriage, right, and my own family. And finally, thank the Lord, I had some people come across my life that kind of gut checked me. Circumstances gut checked me. And I was like, okay, hey, while money is needed in our society to facilitate and do things, it is not the source of joy,
True.
right?
Yep.
And so I finally learned that, finally defined what that meant to me. Now I believe money is a great resource that can help me achieve the things that I want to do. It can help me achieve the things and dreams I have for my wife and my family. Both of generations of our parents live with us now. And I believe in taking care of previous generations, and I want to be able to do that well. And there's places I want to go, bucket list places I want to see with my wife. But even more, I think money becomes a conduit that allows me to get out and love on others more, to be more generous, to go out and actually have an impact versus just talking about having an impact.
Yeah.
And
It's like a tool, and you can use it to build something
Yeah.
great, or you can use that tool to break something down that was
Right.
great or had potential to be great, right?
Exactly.
You decide how to use the tool.
Yeah. And now whatever I'm building isn't built just so I can have piles of money in a bank to go get stuff. I've had a lot of nice stuff, and although it was cool to get it, and believe me, I'm not somebody that's like, hey, go, live on the street and stuff like that and be complete poverty just to give everything away. And anyone that's done that, kudos to you. God calls us all to different things. My belief is you can still have a lot of money and still walk out the plan God has for you. In fact, there's many times God needs godly people out there with the resources that He's blessed them with to then do what He's asked them to do with those resources
Of course.
to have kingdom impact. So for me, I think I choose to believe that money can be whatever you make it. And for me, money can be a very good thing as long as it doesn't become everything you're about and destroy and become the only thing. And the Bible talks about it being an idol. And if it becomes the only thing that you live for, it'll let you down too.
Of course. I think money has control over a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people at one point. Of course I was. Everything was about the money. Everything came back to the point of, I've witnessed this in my own life. It'll never happen again, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And that's a steep cliff to jump off.
Oh,
It
yeah.
sounds like you've done it yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we kind of have to climb back up and really rebuild who we are on top of that ledge, on top of that steep looking over, saying, I don't need to make that jump. And how can I have this and that? Right?
Yeah.
It's not an or.
Well, and you use money beyond just to have impact in the world and help those around you. In your own family, at least for me, what I've decided to do is, I was a licensed EMT. I worked at several hospitals and saw a lot of people pass away, unfortunately. And in those times when people were around the beds, and my dad being a pastor, I saw, went to a lot of, wakes and funerals and stuff. And nobody talked about, wow, I'm glad they left me that huge endowment. And I'm so glad they left me that 100-acre property with the 14-bedroom mansion or whatever they left. Everybody talked about the memories that they had with that person. They talked about the time they went to the beach. They talked about that time that they went, to this event, right? Whatever it is. And I realized probably when my youngest daughter, Paige, was about 6, 7, somewhere in there, that, hey, I need to start making memories and using the money I have beyond what I give away to be generous and love on others, I need to use some of that to create memories. And that's when I really noticed a huge dynamic change after me and Julie had come through some rocky times in our marriage and stuff, is when we started prioritizing making memories together,
Yeah.
right? Going and doing things. This week, even, I'm going with my daughter and her husband to a comedian from the UK down in Atlanta, right? And it's something we got at Christmas. I just got back about a month and a half ago. I went to a concert in Dallas with my youngest daughter, Miley. Me and my wife prioritize doing date nights, and then I do daddy-daughter, or me and my son do things. And so it's stuff like that that we talk about now because we've done so much of it.
Yeah.
It's what we talk about whenever we're together, or at Christmas or at Thanksgiving. We've got just this treasure trove
Of course.
of memories that are happy, things that happened that didn't go right, like the delayed flight, or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
meltdown at the air. All those things that happen. But now you look back and you can laugh, and it becomes the real wealth,
Yeah.
Jim. It becomes the real wealth that I wouldn't trade those memories. I don't care if you could give me $500 billion. Wouldn't trade the memories for all that money.
It's unforgettable experiences with your family,
Yeah.
and using money as the conduit to provide those memorable experiences. And I think sometimes and oftentimes, and I've done this in relationships, where you use the money to not create a memorable experience,
Yeah.
but to satisfy incorrect behavior or mistakes previously.
Yeah.
And that was where I was using money, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to go on this guy's trip,
Yeah.
and next weekend, here's some money. You can go do whatever you want with your friends. To someone I was dating at the time, where all they wanted was to go on a trip together.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can take that story and multiply it in all different ways, shapes, fashions, or forms.
Yep.
But it's, what's the purpose behind the dollar?
Yeah.
Right. And, it's also one of those things where, some people donate to people on the street. Some people donate to organizations. Some people donate to churches. Right.
Yep.
But I think it doesn't matter where you donate to me, or what you believe in, or what you want to fix or help or be part of.
Yeah.
But do you know where that dollar is going, right? Because
Right.
I've had a lot of those conversations, and if you can't regurgitate where that dollar is going for me, then I don't know the purpose of it, which in turn I'm not going to provide it for you.
Yeah.
I love the honesty in the folks in the street. Like, the signs were like, I need a drink. I'm an alcoholic. And it's like, hey, you're sick.
Yep.
Here's $5. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need me to tell you shouldn't be drinking. You just need to get by right now in that moment. At least I know where that $5 is going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think in terms of donating money, we're so cautious of where that dollar is going, but we never reflect and look in the mirror about ourselves.
Yeah.
How are we using the dollar?
Right.
Is it to shun or to diminish or to silence a negative situation with a family member or a friend? Or is it to create a positive, memorable highlight?
Yeah.
And I think those decisions in my life, I've skipped over some of those in the past. But now it's so prevalent to me in front of my face, because it's like, I can do all that stuff and it feels or I can do all this.
Yeah.
And it's really empowering. It's really amazing what you can do with it.
Yeah.
And I think you need it. I don't think I've done the charity consulting. I've done a lot of it the last year.
Yeah.
And it's draining, and there's not a win-win oftentimes in it.
Yeah.
And someone was like, well, why don't you charge all this crazy money? And I'm like, well, I don't want to do that either, right? Like, I want it to make sense for everybody, where everybody wins.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think depending on what I'm doing with the money allows me to make those decisions on how to acquire it.
Right. Well,
It's been an interesting journey over the last 5 years,
Well, and you said something interesting there, is when I start thinking about in my own company as CEO at Dovetail Strategic, and what we're doing and how we're doing it, is right now at this moment, I could pay myself more than what I'm getting paid. I could take those resources, and me and my business partner could make more money. But we decided what our enough was in the season we're currently in, and what our goals were within the rest of this year and going into next year. Is, sure, when we have $1 million just sitting in retained earnings and we have nowhere to go, well, sure, we're going to not only be generous to our team, but there'll be some extra
Of
for
course.
us as well. But in this season, we've chosen to reinvest that back into things. And more importantly, we just have such a belief that more people need to be a part of what we're doing, not because we're great people, but because of what our team is telling us about how happy they are and things like that. We want more people to become a part of that because more people, as many as we can, and we can only reach so many, but if everyone reached the some ones within
course.
their purview, we could all make substantially more impact. But that's one of the things that you said there is you decided and defined what your enough was in the current season. And that changes. The other thing, just because you said it enough now, is it does not mean when you've got, you're at a different point in your life, a different point in your success journey, that has to remain your enough.
Yeah.
Is in this season, we've decided this is our enough. We can achieve and do the things that are important to us. And now we can also bring other people to the party so they can start to get to their enough. They can start to have their cups filled.
Totally.
So that's kind of something I love how you kind of were talking on that point is you need to define what your enough is in regards to money or else it will control you in ways you don't even realize.
Totally, totally. And I think I couldn't agree more. And there's times where I haven't wanted to have those conversations with myself, right?
Yeah.
I didn't want to figure out exactly what this was doing or where that was going. And I think when you really get a control over your finances and understanding, you can put things into place that actually make impact, right? And you have levers that you can pull because you're dialed in and you understand the finance side of it. Frustration came for me when I was doing a lot of charity consulting, but I was wondering why referrals weren't coming back and things like that. Well, I decided to do it for charity.
Yeah.
So when I made that decision to coach you or to consult on your business or look at your sales process or figure out why you lost employees, that was me saying, hey, this is charity.
Yep.
And I don't expect anything back. So why would I expect it back?
Yep.
Well, it was because I didn't define it and I didn't understand it and I didn't know where that time and energy was going. And someone was like, well, it's you're giving away thousands of dollars and I'm like, when it's charity, it's not an equation of money for me. It's time and energy.
Right.
And that's when I didn't understand it. I was doing too much of that and then wondering why the finances didn't, 5x.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So understanding where it's going and how it's being used, I think is just so important. And it comes back to our goals. It comes back to our purpose, our calling, what we stand for, what's important to us.
Yeah.
And more, just as equally important, what's not important to us.
Right. Yeah.
And I think understanding those things as well, like it's not important for me to catch every Titans game this year.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So when someone's saying, hey, I got some cool tickets and they're only $300 and they're 2 rows behind, that's not really important to me right now.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
There'll be a time where I'm like, I'm going to every Titans game.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
How do you balance that, or do you spend time focusing on that? Like, do you carve out time quarterly or annually, and is it personal, and do you do something separate with your business partners? Talk to me a little bit about how you focus and kind of have control over where you spend your time and your finances.
Yeah. Well, and, Jim, it's been something that is in a constant state of learning because there's all kinds of opportunities, especially as you start getting more out there, just like what you were talking about with the nonprofits is, you start thinking, oh, well, I could do this and I could do this. And then people start asking, well, will you do this? Will you do that? And you start to feel this kind of obligation. And before you know it, all your time's gone. And, I've been in a season of even taking to the next level of what I say no to and what I'm saying yes to and getting very concrete in what my yeses are and the whys behind them. So right now in this season, one of my priorities is my oldest daughter is married already and my son just graduated high school. My youngest daughter just started high school is I've got kind of a 3 to 4 year window. And, with my oldest daughter, it's a little less. So it's why I'm prioritizing doing some things over the next 6 months with her and her husband because then they're going to be out doing their own life. And sure, it's not like I'm not ever going to see them, but it'll be a phone call. Instead of it being, hey, they're right here down the street or they're right around the corner. They might move to another place, and I might get to just see them 2 or 3 times a year. So I want to absorb every second I can. And so a lot of my yeses are revolved around is it something I can do that involves one of my children or my wife or my family right now? And so if that business trip, me and my wife are going on a vacation in September, and there was this great opportunity that came up literally a day and a half after we got back from that. And I was like, oh, this would be great to go on. And I was about ready to say no. And then I remembered, oh, hey, my son really wanted to go out to this area. So it's going to work out. He's going to spend a couple of days with one of his really good friends we've known for a long time. I can still go do this thing. Then we're going to stay over the weekend and do some hiking and do some other stuff,
Nice.
right? And so I was like, so that became a yes. If it couldn't have involved my son at all and it coming that close off of vacation, I would have just said no. Because for me, my mental health and being able to go into, and while it is a great opportunity, is coming right in off of vacation is going to be a lot of stuff to do. And so it's going to require the one day I'm in office before I
Yeah.
leave again, I'm
It's
going
going
to
to be
have
intense.
a lot to do. But because I get to now take my son, it becomes even more valuable because now we're going to get to share an experience. We get to ride on the plane together
Yep.
and have time. And so now that sacrifice on that Monday when I'm back and potentially maybe a few times on the trip, when my wife's reading her book or doing her own thing, it's going to be worth it because I'm like, hey, I get to spend this extra because I'm sacrificing here now a little bit. Now I'm going to get to spend this and make a forever memory.
Yeah.
A forever memory, and not just one that I'll carry, but even when I'm gone, it's one that my son will carry with him. And so, because we still talk about the trip we did a couple years ago, and so for me, that's where I start with qualification is it something that's going to create a forever memory with the people I love most?
Love most.
Now, the next qualifier, obviously, is I've got my Dovetail family and the people I care about there is the decision I'm about to make, once I get through the God and my family, is this going to honor the people that depend on me here at Dovetail? Is this going to honor our objective? We have a one big objective we've set, and then we only have 3 things we're doing to get to that objective. And then there's tasks under those things to get there. But if it doesn't check one of those boxes, I mean, you're out there as I get asked to do stuff on the weekly basis. And I wish there were 10 of me. I would love to say yes to everything because I just love people. And there's so many great causes. There's so many great initiatives out there. But I had to get to the place where I realized that just because I said no didn't mean that I hated what they were doing. It didn't mean that, well, you're awful, I don't support you.
Yeah.
All it means is I'm not, at this point in time, I am not the person that you need to do this role, do this position. Could I do it? Absolutely I could. But in this time of moment, it doesn't fit what I feel like God has placed as my qualifiers for yeses, and so I have to say no.
Yeah. Well, I think too, there's times and moments for
Yeah.
the yes or for the no. And, I would rather say no and have a tough conversation
Yeah.
than to not be able to give you 100% of Jim Morris. And
Absolutely.
I've done that.
Wow. Yeah, that's good, Jim.
I've done that, right? Like I've literally said yes and like, oh man, they're just, I can't do it at the level I want to or I should,
Yeah.
or the level that I made a commitment for.
Right.
So if I can't give you 110% of Jim Morris, then I have to say no. And in
Yeah.
those conversations, it's hard. It's hard because it hurts people sometimes.
Yeah.
You may have already committed. Like I've done that before. I was like, yeah, this sounds great.
Yeah.
They left that conversation thinking I was in. Then we talked about the commitment, and I was like, I'm just not going to be able to. Like,
Yeah.
I've got a standing meeting when your meetings are, right?
Right.
So it could just be something of conflict
Yeah.
where I had an obligation,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to hurt that person
Yeah.
by bringing something new in.
Yeah.
So if you can't be flexible,
Yeah.
I'm saying I can't be flexible because of a prior commitment, right?
Yeah.
So there's been some of those too where I've now started to say, hey, well, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the details.
Yeah.
Great. So you're in. And no, this is more of a fact-finding conversation, right? And I think staying curious can sometimes lead to someone making an assumption.
Yep.
So I've also said, hey, I know I've asked you a bunch of questions, like I sound interested, and I am,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure that we have to sit down and talk about all the details before I make a commitment,
Yeah.
because I don't want to lead people on.
Yeah.
And I've been
Absolutely.
led on, right? And I've also been the person who's gotten excited
Yeah.
and assumed a yes based on someone being curious, based on
Right.
someone lit up about it, but not necessarily make that commitment. So I think
Right.
it's almost that dual approach of
Yeah.
making sure you protect yourself, but also the other person in the relationship. Because
Yeah.
to your point, it's not a no, I hate you. It's
Yeah.
not a no, don't call me ever again. It's not a no, don't shake my hand when I see you at the coffee shop. It's just
Yeah.
a hey, not right now.
Right. Well, and you're exactly right, Jim. And it boils down to one of the pillars of relationship, and that's communication. And if you're not going to be fully transparent, that on the flip side, if somebody doesn't respect where you're at in your transparency, that you can uncover real quickly, probably wasn't a good fit.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be because they weren't interested in you or your well-being. They were only interested in what they could get by having you on a show, having you in that role or
Totally.
position. And while there's nothing inherently wrong, but when people are selfish, you can quickly discern that by getting through some communication questions, and you get to the heart of what's really behind it. And also, it's just sometimes just God really, He set those no's up because you have to say no to things, not only to honor the yeses that you feel like is, He has somebody else typically for those people that's even better than you. As tough as that is, you got to swallow a little pride and ego.
Of course.
Is if you take that and every time you're driving to it and you're sitting in the car on the interstate and you're like, gosh, why did I say yes to this? And even if you go in and say, okay, and you can put on the Ritz and you can put on the smile and the
Throw the
swagger.
jacket on,
Yeah,
but
and you can play the role.
there's a stain on that
Your
jacket
heart
somewhere.
is still not. It's not the same as if you're 100% in and it fits fits the yeses that you have and you've predetermined, because you just can't be. And
Do you
so
know what, though, as we're talking about this, I think that makes you better holistically.
Absolutely, I agree.
I think it makes all your performances better when you
Yep.
have discernment to say no,
Yeah.
because you're showing up naturally excited,
Yep.
energized, and that's when I perform the best,
Yeah.
right? When
Yep.
I'm excited, when I feel energy, when I'm like, we're going to crush this thing,
Sure.
let's go. Not so much when I'm like, oh, man, why did I do this?
Yep.
And I've said that recently, like, because I'm not perfect and I make mistakes,
Yeah.
and what I learn is, well, if you found that out last minute,
Yep.
how do you find it out before you commit next time, right? So it's a learning objective of
Yeah.
like, oh, I didn't ask that question, and this is what caused this to whatever, right?
Yep.
It's been interesting to navigate that and then realize I'm actually so much better for protecting my energy, so I show up energized when you get gym.
Yeah.
Because a gym that's not energized is not an impactful one. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Right? And that could be from a number of things. It could be from making a commitment I didn't want to do in the first
Yeah.
place.
Well, and long term, it's more damaging for you to say yes to something that you know should have been a no.
Yeah.
Because even if you get into it, there's going to come a point where it becomes such a drain. Even if you continue to do it, it's people know. You're not hiding. You're no one's like, oh, I just didn't know. Then it's even worse from a reputation perspective, not from an ego or pride side, but just from an influence. It can really have a negative impact on your influence. And so in many ways, it's so much better to say the no up front. And it takes a lot of guts. And you have to really just, and I think being in sales as long as I have is, Jim, I've had so many people. I know you've been in sales too. I've been told so many times. I mean, it's exponentially, ridiculously, infinitely more times I've been told no than I've ever been told yes.
100%. 100%.
And so, guess what? Most people are used to being told no, and so it is something that is okay to say. And you don't. The biggest thing I fault when I would say no, and I know a lot of others, is this guilt of letting others down. Right? As if somehow I'm their personal savior, which I'm not. And that's something I had to learn.
Well, I'll say this too, is people, and I learned this a lot last year with the conference and everything going on, is people would put me in a corner of guilt that I didn't even want to be in. That I like, and I remember there's specifically one person I'm thinking about where, they guilted me into letting them come to the conference, and told me all this stuff to the point where like I was tearing up on the phone. Like I felt really, and I'm like, wow, maybe this maybe this woman could meet someone and maybe her business will change and maybe this is what she needs in the moment. It wasn't. I mean, there's a reason why her life was failing.
Yeah.
She was just not a great person.
Yeah.
I mean, straight up. I can't say it any other way.
Yeah.
But she guilted me. She made me feel that, if I didn't do this, then I was a bad person.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a cost to every person who comes to an event. So I paid for her to come.
Yeah.
It wasn't even just like an absorbed cost. It's I paid out of my wallet.
Yeah.
For someone who made me feel guilty, and then I realized, wow, your personality is why you don't have opportunity, you don't have finances correct, you don't have a high-performing company.
Yeah.
It's you and how you're showing up, and then I think through it even more, and I'm like, wow, I was guilt-tripped really bad, and I fell for it. Like, I tripped and rolled down the hill of guilt, and I didn't deserve any of it, and it was actually... I wasn't going to solve the problem either.
Right. Yeah.
Right? You know how
Exactly.
you think you're going to... I was never going to solve that problem. The things that were going on in her life, I couldn't even relate to.
Yeah.
They've never happened to me. I don't know anybody that's happened to them, right? And so what my influence was maybe positivity and energy.
Yeah.
But that only goes so far.
Right.
Especially for someone that's in that level of hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you say yes to too many things, and we all have heard that, you have to sacrifice. You have to decide what you're sacrificing for that yes. And that's why it's so important to not just think about the things and set your standard of what's a yes and what's a no. You have to write it down.
Yeah.
You have to put it in your phone. And anytime you're making a decision, I go through a little check. I literally pull it up and go through, does this meet this, this, and this? And if it doesn't check those, then I immediately say no.
Yeah.
Without hesitation.
Put it on the shelf for another time, maybe.
Right.
Yep.
And again, sometimes I will say, hey, you know what? It's a no right now because I've got ABC things I've already committed to. I want you to reach back out to me in 6 months and let's retouch base and see where I'm at from a time perspective. Because I think there's something to it. And I also sometimes will say, hey, listen, it's a no for me, but let me connect you. I feel like you should talk to this person and this person because they do this thing, or they're a part, or they have a giant network that would probably be even more beneficial than my network. And so sometimes you are just meant, you're not, and here's the thing, we all want admiration, we want accolades, and not in a bad way, but you like to be told, Jim, you're doing a great job. Wow, Jim, you're amazing. Wow, that was so awesome. Jim, you just always come through. Or Andrew, hey, you're a fantastic guy. Wow, I'm so glad you were here. You really encouraged me, and all that is good. And part of why many times I think we say yes is out of that seeking as a human. This is just a human. You're seeking for people to say, you're awesome, or you're good, or
we want to feel
I
like
appreciate
we belong.
you. You want that appreciation.
We want belonging, yeah.
Yep. And so because of that, many times in your brain you're thinking, oh man, if I do this, they're going to think I'm the bee's knees. They're going to think I'm the number one. Whatever you're thinking that they're going to think. Many times, and they may think some of those things, but if you're doing it strictly based out of hoping that you get something from it, whether that be something tangible, monetary, or man, I hope, man, if I do this, I know I'm going to get connected to hundreds of people, and then you go into it and do it, and you get connected to 2, and you're like, man, this is a bummer. And it's like, if you didn't communicate, like you said on the front end, this is why I'm coming here, this is kind of my expectation, I'm going to bring a lot of value.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, is knowing your value. And that also helps you say yes and no, right? I know what I bring to the table, and you may or may not agree with that, but I'm the one that has to lay on my pillow or go on a trip and not be there next to my wife when I go to bed at night. And so I'm going to choose her, believe me, 1,000 times more every time than I'm going to be in some hotel room.
Yeah.
Right? When I'm saying yes to that hotel room or traveling somewhere, is I'm saying no to my family. And so it has to be something that I believe brings value to them first and the goals we've set down, and then it has to be something where I've valued myself and I've communicated this is the expectations of what I need to get out of this. I'm going to give you this, this, and this. Are you good with that? And it took me a long, long time, Jim. I mean, a long, long time. This is just something in the last year.
Yeah.
Okay? This isn't something Andrew's been doing for a decade. This is the last year. I finally was like, all of the points I go back to my life where I hated what I was doing, or I hated what I was involved in, or I was so burned out, were times I said yes to things that I knew the moment that I said yes should have been a no. I mean, I started going through my
It's
journals and stuff,
powerful.
man. And I
Powerful.
was like, I was just like, this is so silly. And I'm not going to live the last 40, 50 years of my life in burnout, in like, just, why did I say yes to this? And
Yeah.
then
Regret
I was
or
taught, you clean your plate when growing up. And if you say yes to it,
you
even
damn
if
well do it. Yeah.
you just do it, and so I'm a big handshake commitment guy, and you follow it through. And so for me, it took me a long time to realize in work environments I was involved in before I started my own company, there was a lot of abuse that I allowed to come in. And sometimes you allow that because if you're getting something from somebody, maybe you're
Yeah.
getting something, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's money and you're like, well, I'm getting paid $25K a month, and like, oh, they treat me like crap, and they, don't respect me.
Yeah, that's my corporate
But
career,
yeah,
right? It's like I'm selling my soul for the dollar at this
exactly.
point.
And
Like this person is not
exactly.
smarter.
Yep.
They don't listen to me. Their communication is
Yep.
terrible. They're narcissistic. They're
Yep.
manipulative. I've literally caught them lying over and over and
Yep.
over. I don't value this human, and if it wasn't for a small little fucking green piece of paper, you
Exactly.
wouldn't catch me
No.
100 yards near this human.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
then I quit, and you still don't catch me near
Yep.
that person, right? Like I literally seen one of the owners, and I was with my family, so it was a hey, what's up? But
Yep.
it was like I would have just turned around and walked out of there as fast as I could. I
Right.
didn't want to disrupt what was occurring, but like I don't have to be near you.
Right.
I don't have to take your phone calls.
Right.
Right? There's people I've worked with that I've blocked their number, and someone was like, "Oh, that's immature." I'm like, "No, that protects my sanity."
Yeah.
That person, we don't work together. I don't owe them anything. I fulfilled every commitment,
Yeah.
every financial responsibility, everything that I said I was going to do, I did.
Yeah.
It's over now,
Yeah.
right? And you could
Exactly.
probably hear to my voice I'm a little fired up because guess what? That person still pops up in my life today,
Yeah.
trying to creep in all these little ways, and I just don't allow it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will not allow that person into my life over money.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And because I put up those boundaries, there's been things that have happened, and I've done deals with people around that person, and I've made money.
Yeah.
But I'm not taking that phone call. I'm not getting on the call. I saw the gentleman recently in the coffee shop,
Yeah.
and I got up and packed my shit and got out of there.
Yeah.
That's not immature to me. That's me having control over and foresight, right?
Yeah.
I know that person's going to walk up to me and there's going to be a conversation
Yeah.
that doesn't benefit me in the moment,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And what I'm doing is removing myself because I can,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
that took a while.
Yeah.
Usually I'd be fearful or frightful and I'd go on the offense and I'd attack.
Yeah.
I'd go walk up to them and I'd control the situation, the conversation. But then what would happen is I'd leave and I'd be thinking about them for the next 48 hours.
Exactly.
I walked out of that coffee shop 2 weeks ago, brother.
Yep.
And I called my wife. I was like, hey,
Yep.
I just ran into so-and-so. And you're going to be proud. I packed my stuff up and I'm going to a different coffee shop. But she was like, good. Wow, that's great. And it may sound like this small moment, but it's that moment of, dude, I control my life. And I control the outcome.
Yeah.
And I believe that I have the right to.
Yeah.
And I'm not hurting anybody.
Yep.
I'm not harming anybody, right?
Yep.
Me walking out of a coffee shop has no negative impact on anybody.
Exactly.
Besides maybe that random person who might ask me for directions.
Right.
Right? But like, who knows if that happened 20 minutes after I left, right? It didn't happen the last time.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, no, you're exactly right, Jim. And I mean, at the end of the day, just because you block someone or you realize, hey, this person is having a negative impact on me, doesn't make them necessarily the worst person in the world. Maybe they're not evil, but for me, they're having a negative impact on me. They're not life-giving to me. I'm not able to give them value because they won't receive it, and so thus there's no exchange of value or anything. It's okay to have an amicable, like, you're just not talking to someone anymore. Like, it doesn't have to be like F you and, that's not, you have to block people. And so it is so healthy. And so it's something you have to do. And it took me a long time as well. I mean, it's just something in the last few years, man. You don't realize, you think, oh man, I'm big and bad and I'm type A and I got all this. I didn't realize how many people I let into my life and were not controlling, but had
Massive
real estate,
influence. Massive influence
or
too.
stock in
Yeah.
my life that I
Yeah.
gave shares to, and I'm like, why the hell does that person have shares in my company that is my life?
Yep.
Like I gotta buy those suckers back, and they don't even get to buy anymore.
Yep.
And it's I don't know why it's taken me so long, and I know others are in that boat. So I think if people are there, I know both of us would send out encouragement to take an inventory of who is you're adding value to and who's adding value to you, who you love, who you have and in your life that's helping encourage you and lift you up, and focus your efforts on the positive people, and anything that has negativity at any level, get rid of it immediately.
Yep. Yep. And it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
What he just said to do and advised you is going to hurt, because
Yep.
you're gonna look at that list and you're going to realize there's way less people on
Yep.
it that provide the value,
Yep.
or there's an exchange that is remotely fair.
Yeah.
Right? I would call it fair. And sometimes that doesn't mean to cut that person out.
No.
That doesn't mean to not engage with them or spend time with them. I think in those moments, what it does is it brings to the forefront
Yeah.
the reality.
Yeah.
And as long as you know the reality, then you can now make a decision based on perspective reality, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't mean to call someone up and blah, 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 you use me or this and that. It just means, hey,
Yeah.
maybe it's time that I ask for some help.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time that I need a referral, right? Like, we're shooting this podcast 4.5 weeks out of Impact Effect 24. This will come out after it, but like, now's the time where I go through relationships and go, I connected you to this person and I helped you this and I sent this and you closed this piece. There's a lot of people that don't do that in return, which is
Right.
okay. But now is the time where I have to remind a lot of folks. And I don't do it because you need to help me. I just, hey, remember that time when I needed you, man?
Yeah.
You know? Or you needed me and I
Yeah.
was there, I need you. And that request, that conversation, that ask,
Yeah.
maybe it's not the right time.
Right.
Maybe someone says, hey, Jim, you know what? I can't commit to inviting 5 friends to the conference.
Yeah.
Cool. I love you. I see you. It's all good. I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
Right? Because the last thing I want is to leave there after you've committed and what we were talking about earlier, you don't want to do what you just said.
Yeah.
Right? And what I've learned from last year to this year is to ask people how they feel about it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want the yeses.
Yeah.
I want the truth. Right?
Well,
and some people,
Yep.
there's friends of mine that are like, I don't want to send this out to anybody.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to go.
Yeah.
So I don't want to invite people to something I'm not going to. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, let's dive into why you don't want to go. Like, is it just not fit a need? Does it, you know, do you just, you're out of town? Like,
Right.
but help me acquire information. I'm not mad. I'm not upset.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the difference when you're asking someone, and it comes back to what we were talking about is the honesty of commitment. And that's actually the question. I said, can you commit to yourself for inviting 5 people? Not to Jim. Can you commit to yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Jim, why do you think, in your experience, it's so hard for people to be honest? Because I've found, and I know it was for me, and I know my reason for it, or I think I've discovered pieces of the reason for it. I think I'm still unpacking all the internal complexities of the whys behind it. But, I found when I really started being transparent and honest with people, not that I was sitting around lying, but when I knew that things should be a no, or when I knew, hey, like, I'm not going to be able to do that, and you just hated, is I've found more peace in the last year by being my truest self, and walking out, being transparent with people. I've felt more free, more at peace than I ever have in my entire life. Why do you think we struggle so much with doing something like being honest we know? I mean, there's so many research, there's so much stuff out there on what it does to bring you peace and happiness in your life. Why do we struggle with it so much, man?
It's a good question. A lot of those conversations are difficult, and I don't think we're equipped I mean, let's just be real. What learning were you taught from, all the way up to college on conflict resolution? Have you ever taken a class on it?
No, you were taught to show up on time. If you didn't show up, you got detention.
So
If you
people
were late,
don't know
yeah,
how to have a
yeah,
tough conversation, number one.
yeah,
Number two is we don't actually teach communication, right? So you
yeah,
can go to a communications class.
yeah,
My communications class, I shit you not, was the final project, and I had to work really hard on this, was to give a speech.
yeah,
This was communications 101,
yeah,
okay? Like you had to take the class to give a speech and not have a Boston accent, because when you're on stage and you're selling and you're in business, you may turn someone off who's not from the North. What did I learn in that? To hinder my
yeah.
authentic self.
So don't be you.
That's what I
Yeah,
was taught,
yeah,
right? To hinder my
wow,
authentic self. That was communication class for Jim Morris
yeah,
that I paid for.
yeah,
I freaking paid for it, right? Like I paid for college cash.
yeah,
Like I paid the dollars.
yeah,
Um,
wow,
so when I think through,
yeah,
we don't know how to have tough conversations. We're not equipped with how to respond. We
yeah,
take things personal.
yeah.
This is my hardest thing with communication. I take it personal.
Well, look at the interstate. You don't even know those people, right? And you take that personally. You've never talked to them.
You've never talked to them, and you're,
Yeah,
I hate you and F
yeah,
this and blah,
yeah,
blah, blah. So I think that's truly the reason in my mind
yeah.
is, and,
Well,
and
that's
what I've
good.
experienced and what
Yeah,
I've heard people experience is, Jim, it's easier to just conform. I mean, right? That's conformity in anything. It's
yeah,
it's more comfortable. I don't want to piss people off. I don't want to upset people. I don't want to be polarizing,
yeah,
right? And like talk about the conference, the first big conference, I had 3 people complain about a speaker.
yeah,
And like initially I was like, "Oh my gosh,
yeah,
I'm upsetting people."
yeah,
And then I was like, "Good. I would have had the wrong people in the room.
right.
I would have had the wrong speakers. If you're not polarizing with a belief and you have conviction behind it
Yeah,
to the point where you're in your face saying, hey, I believe this so much. I'm teaching it to you. I'm telling it to you. You need to believe it. It changed my life.
yeah,
Then I don't want you on the stage
yeah,
because you're just using logic and bullshit and sound bites and
yeah,
little snippets of what people want to hear,
yeah,
and you're piling them together. And
yeah,
I used to do that when I spoke on stage.
yeah,
Right? Like I used to be that person because
yeah,
I didn't want to come off and be like, you're a jerk.
yeah,
I've had people say, man, every other word's a swear. That's not the truth, I swear.
yeah,
But it's not every other word.
yeah,
Good. This is, don't listen to
yeah,
don't download this podcast, right? Like,
yeah,
I didn't know how to have those conversations. I felt attacked.
yeah,
I felt people, wow, I'm not doing any good in the world because these 3 people didn't align.
yeah,
And I think that's where we've been taught to conform. We've been taught to fit in.
yeah,
There's white Nike shoes at the store that every 5th grader is wearing. And then there's orange ones you really want, but you buy the white Nikes because everybody else does.
yeah,
And your dad or your mom tells you to or lets you.
yeah,
Like we go back to our parents and
mm-hmm.
the impact, right? Like pick the orange shoes if you like them.
Yeah,
Hopefully your parents will let you pick them.
yeah,
Maybe you can't get them. Maybe those are the more expensive ones. But let's have that conversation in real
yeah,
time. And I think we want everything to be happy and fluffy.
yeah,
And in turn, we actually don't cause that by not telling the truth.
right,
Because what happens is, I mean, let's go back to my childhood drama, right? Like, I'm still upset at this age with my mom because she didn't tell me they were addicted to OxyContin. I had to find
yeah,
out.
yeah,
That's why I was so resentful over the years
yeah,
because I couldn't, and it still comes up. Like I still have trust problems
yeah,
because I didn't know you were lying. You were hiding an addiction that did affect me.
right,
Every day that affected me,
yeah,
right? Water with cereal instead
yeah,
of milk. That's affecting me. But if you came to me and built human connection and said, hey, we're struggling, we have a problem, I still would have respected you, still my parents. My parents still taught me great things in life,
yeah,
right? Great morals and ethics. Like that's the one thing when someone was like, oh, that happened, that'd have been so terrible. I'm like, it actually wasn't as terrible as it could have been.
yeah,
My parents actually were telling me not to do bad things the whole time
hmm,
and still upholding a level of moral and ethics, even though it was a lie,
Yeah.
but they still taught me the right things, right from wrong, left from right.
Yeah.
So I just think through some of those situations and I'm like, I'd rather have the transparency in all those bad situations. I'd rather just
Right.
know than to guess, to assume.
Yeah.
And we tend to not have those
Yeah.
conversations sometimes, which in turn make it worse, right?
For sure.
And we can add stuff onto it.
Yeah.
We can add layers that aren't real. We can assume. We can
Yeah.
create these stories of fiction. But if we just had the truth, that effect,
Yeah.
that perspective, that negative reality could have shrunk
Yeah.
to just the truth. That still sucked.
Yeah.
It's still bad. But we've kind of built it on.
Yeah.
And I think that's where trauma comes from over the years. Like,
Yeah.
I started thinking through some stuff. I'm like, my parents never did that.
Yeah.
Why was that even a thought? That wasn't even reality.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the water without milk, that was a reality, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of bad things that were reality, but some of the things I've made up over the years, and I'm like, that never actually happened.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, when you're not being authentic, I think.
Sorry to go there with
No,
the
yeah.
family and
No.
bring back some negative perspective
Yeah.
around my life, but just
Yeah.
it's kind of what came to
No,
my
for
head
sure.
right there in that moment.
Well, I think, the thing that we fail to realize sometimes is many times we think by not being transparent, not being fully authentic, we're thinking about, oh, we're going to hurt that other person's feelings, or we're thinking, well, they're going to think less of me. But many times when you don't acknowledge those
Yeah.
and you continue to go down the path, you actually damage the relationship further. You can have longer term damages to not only yourself but to them. Because here's the thing, if you're taking up space in someone's life and you're not supposed to be there, or you're not the one, and you try to plug yourself in by not being honest, you can actually cause them setback. And people don't think like that. Is sometimes your no's are actually getting them into their next best thing that God has for them.
Yeah.
And you can be a roadblock just as much as you can be an on-ramp.
Well, I think that's why we need tough conversations. That's why we need to understand conflict at a higher level, because if my friend's making bad decisions and I just don't know how to approach them, that bad decision could be their next.
Yeah.
That could be their life.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I can think back I got a friend who grew up with my whole life. He was living with me, addicted to heroin.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't, I didn't have the conversation. He was gone one night and dead 6 months later.
Yeah.
I should have had that conversation of, dude, I know everything.
Yeah.
You're not clean.
Yeah.
You're messing up and we need to go get it fixed.
Yeah.
But I just ignored it and then he was gone.
Yeah.
And because he knew that I knew. Right? So even though I never addressed it, he left in the night because he was like, I know this is coming, right? Like Jim's catching on.
Yeah.
And then, you don't talk to him and then he's dead.
Yeah.
And that story is crazy because the night before he died, I was driving down the street and he was walking, not in a town I lived in either.
Yeah.
Like 2 towns over, and time stopped. And he looked at me and I looked at him. And literally time stopped and we just locked eyes. And then that night he passed away.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Wild. But you know what I mean? Like that, like I could have had a hard conversation and maybe that would have changed the trajectory.
Yep.
Now, of course, I'm not sitting here saying I wear that on my heart and it's all my fault.
Sure.
Right? He was doing drugs for a while and had his opportunities and
Sure.
was very aware that this was not the path of life. Right?
Yeah.
But who knows?
Well, I think that also goes into the bucket of regret too, as part of the component of not having regret is not only jumping out and taking risks, for sure, there's that part of that, but also being authentic and real with yourself on what you're wanting, right? Because that's the other side of that, is many times we tell ourselves what we think others would want to hear, or what, oh, well, this is too risky, da-da-da-da-da, I'm not this. And so many times our self-doubt comes from, is birthed in the seeds of lack of authenticity, lack of wanting to be real, because like you said, we're taught to conform from an early age. You have a teacher, you listen to your teacher. You listen to whoever's in charge of you, right? You're always listening to somebody else who has authority over you. And it creates this kind of vacuum to where yes, you have thinking to a certain degree, but you're not taught to really explore. And I can't remember who said it, but when you start thinking about some of the most successful people, is they're not all the people that went to the Ivy League schools. It's a lot of the C plus students that are out there running and doing the things that matter most in the world, and they're hiring the person that had all the PhDs and the letters behind their name,
Yeah.
that spent all that time and invested. And I'm thankful for those people, and I'm in no way discrediting anyone. But at the end of the day, I think that it all bleeds into is when you're not being authentic, when you're not being real, it bleeds into every area of your life. And it not only holds you back, but then I think you can become a stumbling block to a lot of other people, which it just doesn't make any sense. And so I think that as we look at that, I know that it has been tough. And I too had a friend that I wish I had done more. He had some problems with, weight and things like that. And I wish I tried to work out with him sometimes. And I'm not saying I'm not exactly, Arnold Schwarzenegger over here, but like he had some major problems, like really major
Yeah.
emotional eating issues. And I tried to work out with him a few times. He kind of got flaky. Then we kind of moved apart and weren't around each other and stuff like that. And then some different circumstances happened, and ended up. It was interesting. I happened to be up on a business trip, stopped by at like 10 p.m. We ended up talking till like 2 or 3 in the morning and going through some interesting things where he was just like, "Hey man, I want to apologize for this," and I was like, "Yeah, I want to apologize for this." And 2 weeks later, he had a heart attack and died.
Wow.
Right, and he was 36.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's like it was cool. And I remember it's not cool that he passed away, but
Yeah, yeah.
I was like,
Having that experience.
how gracious of God to allow that moment, because this has been one of my friends, since I was in high school, and we'd been through a lot together. And at the end of the day, it was cool that God allowed that to happen, because there wasn't a plan to go by there. He'd had something else going on, and I just stopped and knocked on his door. I was like, but I think that boldness, like when I start thinking about it, that's the tact we need to take, is don't let any more moments go by where you're not real, authentic, or transparent with those around you. Whether that means you need to tell somebody, hey, like, I can't be a part of this. I
Yeah.
know it sucks. I know that it may let you down. But I think if we can get to that level, we'll find more of the happiness and joy we're looking for in life at the other end of some tough conversations. And communication, like you alluded to, it's taught for sales and to get something out of something. Real communication is selfless.
Yeah.
Right? When you
Yeah.
think about your best relationships, whether it's your wife or your best friends, it's completely transparent. My business partner, we have some of the best conversations because we don't agree on everything. But we're very real and transparent with how that is making each other feel, why we think that's a bad idea. We're not sitting there saying, well, you're dumb. That's a stupid, we're literally having conversations in full transparency. And
Well, there's a level of maturity in that conversation. That's a
Yeah.
mature communication
Yep.
opportunity,
Right.
right? Like, and I think that's where we struggle.
Yep.
And I think back of like, in any relationship, a friend of mine going through a breakup,
Yep.
years and years and years, and I'm like, I've seen how people respond.
Yep.
That person doesn't know how to communicate.
Yep.
Like, they're playing a game that's not how the world works. And
Right.
once you find a woman, in this case, a woman who can communicate at a mature level,
Yep.
when you go talk to her and say, hey, this isn't working, or I need this or this, she's going to respond maturely, not point the finger, which in turn, she just doesn't want to look at herself, right? And I think those are some of the hardest relationships with people we care about and we love, but in fact, they just don't know how to have a mature conversation and communicate at a higher level without the emotion. Feel the emotion. If you're pissed off, but don't attack with anger, communicate that it makes you feel angry. Right? Those are two drastically different ways to have a conversation. And that's what it sounds like with you and your business partner.
Yeah. When the flip side of that coin is the other side of communication and transparency is you then have to be willing to shut your mouth and listen to the other person.
Actively.
And so it's easy for me to tell you no to this. Hey, Jim, this is what I'm thinking. Right? But if I'm not willing to shut my mouth and say, okay, Jim, hey, how are you feeling? How does that make you feel? What are you thinking? do you agree with this? Do you think I'm out to lunch? If I'm not willing to shut my mouth and let someone else talk and be transparent with me,
Yep.
then
You,
it's not real communication, and you won't. That's the flip side of the coin. In order to have peace, the equation has to be whole
Yeah.
and complete.
Win-win,
Yeah.
right? Both people have to have the opportunity
Yeah.
to stay curious, ask
Yep.
questions, answer questions,
Yep.
and give the person the platform
Yep.
to where they feel that you've heard them
Yep.
holistically and
Yep.
completely. And when you give people that opportunity, you can be on polarizing, drastically different sides of the spectrum,
Yep.
but there's a level of respect.
Absolutely.
It's
Yep.
what we don't have in our country right now in a debate.
Right.
I'm not going to go into politics left or right, but what you saw a month ago, that's not a debate.
Yeah.
And we should be having those debates on every level with the presidents all the way down to I
Yeah.
started a business a week ago with my buddy,
Yep.
right? And I think this and they think that. We
Yep.
should have a true debate. And I think that's where we're losing at every level in this country, in this
Yeah.
business world. Again, not to say Trump or Biden or any of that. I'm just saying, like, let's talk about what's important, express our opinions, why we believe something, and then open an ear
Yep.
and listen, and then have a rebuttal. Whether that's, wow, that's a great point. I never thought of that, man. Thanks
Yeah.
for bringing that up.
Yep.
Wow, that made me make me reconsider some things.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're changing? You believe him? Well, no, I'm not saying that, right? But I'm saying, hey, this is a two-way conversation. Thank you. I received what you said, and I agree with that. That doesn't necessarily maybe change the direction I want to go.
Right.
But I've acquired that, and now that's a piece of my collateral information to make a strategic decision.
Well, and sometimes it does impact because we can't know everything. As smart as we are, Jim, it's impossible for any one person to know everything. And so when you listen, gain other people's perspective, insights, and get pieces of knowledge from them that you didn't have, there have been times that my core ethics and morals, those don't change, right? But when it comes to making decisions and stuff, when I've stopped to listen and make sure that real communication is open, there have been many times I'm like, you know what, you're right. I didn't think of that angle. I didn't think of that perspective. And it changes what I was going to do many times for the better.
Yeah.
Right?
But that's you can communicate maturely. I think that there's a level of maturity when you say, wow, you're right.
Yeah.
There's a level of strength. There's a level of peace, authentic, right? Like it's real. And we don't get that often because we don't want to seem weak. If we are debating about something, I'm like, man, that's a great point. It's a great point.
Yeah.
I shouldn't feel that, oh, I just gave you one, one for the away team, not the home team, right?
Yeah.
I agree with it. I believe it. Good point. Let's keep going.
Yep.
And then at the end, I'll make my assumption based on acquiring all the information. But to your point, you're right, man. Like different perspective can change everything.
Yeah.
Based on an experience or a belief or something that's happened in your life that I've never experienced.
Right. Well, and it all goes back to the core building blocks, or I believe the core building blocks of relationship are, okay, is love, generosity, right? Those are the two basic building blocks of everything. Because guess what? In generosity is found is if I am giving you time, if I am giving you the ability to speak while I listen. And this is not like you couldn't have these, but these are all gifts. I am choosing to listen. I'm choosing to let you say this or that. I'm choosing to bring value to people, because what people often want, they have this list of things they want, and they fail to realize that everything they want, the barrier, the wall is them.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing, they're looking in the mirror, right? And they have all these things they want, and they don't realize if they would just break that mirror so they could actually see everyone else, is when you walk to the other side of that, is when you bring value, unless it's a toxic relationship you need to say no to, you typically gain value.
Yeah.
When you give time to someone that fits your yes criteria, right, you're going to get something back. When you take time to listen, you're going to gain knowledge and perspective you didn't have before. And really, when you're not just generous with your money, everybody looks to, giving away money, is, like I said in the beginning, when you look at real life balance, it really is at the end of what you're saying yes and no to, but more than that, it's you're choosing to love everyone without judgment. That doesn't mean that I agree with what they're doing, but I love them enough as a human to be generous enough to say, hey, I want to listen to what you have to say because I don't know everything. I want to listen to what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Because just because I want it doesn't mean it's a fit for you. I want to be willing to say, hey, let's part ways. It's time for us to move on. There's something else you need to walk into and sing for me. To have tough conversations. That can be generous in and of itself. And all those things culminate into having real relationships that actually are life-giving in the long term versus life-sucking and detriment and being burnt out and all the other things that go with it. So, but the biggest thing I had to learn is I was so focused on me, and that can also be what people think of me, is when I kind of broke that mirror that I looked at every day. Now, we want to have inflection, and I'm not saying don't look at you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, sure, you want to have reflection and
Yeah.
inflection on yourself, but you can get so caught up on you, and that's where so many people are, that you don't. And it's easy to forget that the world isn't made up of just you, and you can't build companies with just you. It has to be us together, and if you can't listen to others, then there is no us. There's just you. And that's a lonely place to be because I've been there.
Man, dropping some wisdom right there, dude. Like, I think everybody needs to just rewind about a minute and a half and just listen to exactly what you said again. That's powerful. That's very powerful. And one of the things that, I mean, you hit home with me is you talked about love, the first thing being the most important. Like, the unifying bond on this earth is love.
Yeah.
And that's where the root of everything is created and built that matters.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Whether that's a human life, whether that's an animal, whether that's creating to help someone,
Yeah.
to bring positive opportunity to them,
Yeah.
whether it's a conference, whether it's the right promotional product at Dovetail Strategic,
Yeah.
right? That gets you in front of the person or helps with that sale or helps with that opportunity to then
Right.
impact those people and those employees and those consumers and those customers. So,
Yeah.
man, what a great conversation today.
No, but Jim, thank you, and I appreciate it, and you said it great. I mean, at the end of the day, relationship is where impact starts. It truly is. So thank you for having me, brother.
Of course, man. Thanks for being here. And thanks to you for listening. This was, like I said when we started, an impactful conversation. And join us next time. We'll see you next week.